Hello, everyone. I'm honored today to welcome my great friend, Yuri Akahira. So, she is someone who I respect so much, and she's someone who I've been friends with for about 20 years now. And it's really interesting because at first glance we seem so different, but actually we have so much in common in terms of our um, ambitions and the way we really appreciate different cultures from around the world, etc. And what I really admire about Yuri is her strength and beauty inside and out, and also the fact that she's able to make friends with anybody. And we'll discuss that today in the interview. So thank you so much, Yuri, for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Yuri. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm so honored to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you could please start by discussing where you were born and raised.
Sure. So I'm originally from Tokyo and grew up in Tokyo until high school. But I was actually born in Iwate Prefecture. It's in Tohoku region. It's the upper north, and where my mother is originally from, and which happened to be actually the same town as Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, it's the same town. It's quite common to give birth in your mother's hometown. So my dad is from Tokyo, and I grew up in Tokyo so until I graduated from high school.
Okay, thank you. So I understand that you studied abroad and you've been living in multiple countries. But first of all, how did you first become interested in other cultures?
Okay, so I think when I was in 15, one of my best friends from middle school, she moved to LA with for her dad's job, and then I had a chance to visit her with other best friends. So I think that was my first time visiting the US, and it was honestly it was like an eye-opening experience because I was always told growing up in Japan, and you know how Japanese people are like they could be they're not as tall as I guess Westerners, right? So when I went to the US to visit, I think everyone appreciated my height. I think that was a such a interesting experience for me, and I had such a great time with my friends, and that was my first time visiting the US. And then I think I had also a chance to visit China for 10 days for exchange program. So I'm forever grateful to my mother who found this program because if she didn't tell me about this program, I would never apply for this. So I think for me to learning Chinese and visited China at the young age when I was, I think it was 16, it was also a different type of experience that I had. Then I think it was, again, I had an exchange student from Brazil studying for a year in
Mm,
in my school. And we became instantly like best friends. Even though she didn't speak English, I didn't speak English very well at the time, and we were communicating with each other with like Portuguese, Japanese dictionary. So I get through her, I met so many international students from all over the world. And also I got to hang out with lots of Japanese kids who grew up speaking English, and some of them mixed Japanese kids. So I think that really got me interested in learning different cultures and languages. And I think part of being in that kind of community felt like I could be whoever I want to be. So I think
mhm,
that got me really interested in also study abroad.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, thank you so much. And you studied abroad for college, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And where did you go to study and what did you study?
Sure. So before I get into that, so I have another story. So in my senior year in high school, again, I'm forever grateful to my mother. So she found this host family program in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon. So I had opportunity to visit Portland, Oregon for 3 weeks studying English with other international students. Now they became my American family to visit one of the biggest school, University of Oregon, which is 2 hours just south of Portland, Oregon, to look over the campus, right? And then I totally fell in love with the campus. So I only actually applied for Oregon because I
Mm,
just fell in love with Oregon. So that's where I studied, and also I had an amazing time. And I majored in double major sociology and international development, and focused on actually women's issues because
mm.
that was something that I was very, very interested in.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really funny because another person that I interviewed recently also said that she studied abroad at the University of Oregon. And
Oh,
so,
really?
yeah, it seems like that region seems to draw a lot of people. And I haven't visited the University of Oregon, but I understand it's full of nature, and I would love to go someday. So thank you so much for sharing that. Um, so, among the many cultures that you're familiar with, where do you feel most at home?
Yeah. So I okay, I think definitely the US because I think I lived in the US the longest outside of Japan, and I always felt, I don't feel I fit in, Japanese culture, fit Japanese culture. That I feel like the US where I used to live, like for example, the Pacific Northwest or Washington D.C. area, I think that's where I feel, I guess, feel at home the most.
And why is that? Aside from the fact that you lived there the longest, is there
Yeah,
anything
sure.
about? Mhm.
Right. I think it's because of the diversity. And I guess the people definitely. I think I can be whoever I want to be, and I can be
Mhm.
just be myself. But I guess, as you know, in Japan, or I would say in Asia, because I also lived in Singapore before for a little bit for work, that there's always some sort of like unspoken rules that you are expected to be someone else, like you should be this, you should be that,
Mhm.
that kind
Mhm.
of expectations always there in Asian culture. So I
Mhm.
think I always wondered that ever since I was a teenager.
I see. I see.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you so much. And because you talked about your teenage years, I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about the difficult experiences you had while you were in Japan as a teenager.
Yes, sure. So when I was 13, so that's our first year in middle school in Japan, I was bullied for a year. So it was quite intense, and it was one of the most difficult experience that I had in my life. And I think the most difficult thing was that I couldn't talk to my parents about this, and I couldn't talk
Mhm.
to my teachers, I couldn't talk to any of my friends for help, and I ended up thinking about commit suicide as well because it just, the bullying lasted for a year that I just couldn't take it anymore. And, kids can be very cruel, right?
Mhm.
And things that they did to me was just when I think about this right now, I think back in the day probably was not a big deal, but I think nowadays I think it could be like a big, I guess, issues in schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I thought about commit suicide, I obviously started writing a will, and then all of a sudden I realized that why should I throw why should I throw away my life for her,
Yeah.
and I shouldn't, waste my life on this negative experience. So
Mhm.
then obviously I didn't, I stopped, right? But yeah, it was very, very difficult. And then 13 is a quite young age to
Yeah.
realize, I felt kind of isolated and then alone and nobody was able to help. Even though, yeah, of course, my parents always loved me, always supported me, and they're always there for me, but I just didn't want them to feel worried.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And how was that resolved? Did something happen, or was it just a gradual resolution?
Um, I honestly didn't understand why that happened, but because
Mhm.
I think I moved to the new city, I was a new student. I think it's easy to target a new, student to be bullied, I guess. And I think I was always stand up just because I was so outgoing and then try to
Mhm.
make friends all the time.
Mhm.
I think, I guess she didn't really like that much, like that, you know, because I think I was kind of different from the
Mhm.
rest of the kids in school.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
kind of knew already that I maybe don't fit in with, the typical Japanese culture where you have to follow rules all the time, like unspoken rules everywhere.
Okay. All right. So I understand that in the short term, you were writing your will, and that made you think about, this is not how you want to live your life. And so it really was a change of mindset. But I also wanted to ask about the long-term process of slowly building your confidence and recovering from that, because I was also bullied in elementary school, and this is something that
Mm, I'm
um,
sorry.
is still, thank you, and that is still
Mm,
affecting me in terms of personal relationships.
mm,
I always have self-doubt in terms of whether people actually like me or just hanging out with me just to be nice and out of sympathy.
mm.
So it's really difficult, and so I was wondering if you could explain how you built your confidence in your friendships over time after this difficult process.
Right, sure. So I think during the second year in middle school, she was still in my class, but I was able to become friends with like other students who came to my class. In Japan, Japanese school, every year we have a class shift, right? So then I had friends who I could trust, and I was able to share my feelings, and I was able to share my stories with them, and then they simply cared for me. And I also met a girl who was bullied before, and then
Mm,
we, share the same kind of experience. I think that definitely helped me to be able to kind of feel like, oh, I'm not alone, at the end of the day. Again, I couldn't talk to my parents at that time still, but at least I had friends to share my feeling with. And then I think eventually, when I went to high school, as I mentioned, I met so many international students from all over the world that they made me realize, oh, I can be myself. Like I can be
mm-hmm,
whoever I want to be. And they loved me for who I am. So that obviously gave me a little bit of confidence, and also a little bit of like a true identity of like who I am.
mm-hmm,
Then I think when I decided to study abroad, it was like my decision to study
mm-hmm,
abroad and then my decision to move on my own, to the US. So I was able to accomplish that. And then even after I moved to the US, I still accomplished like lots of different things other than just graduating from school, right?
yeah.
So I think that gave me so much confidence as a
Mm-hmm,
person.
mm-hmm,
And eventually, I think a bullying experience back in when I was 13 became just a difficult, experience that I had. Of course, I'll never forget ever for the rest of my life. But I think that only gave me strength
mm-hmm,
and be strong, become a stronger person. And yeah, if whoever is watching this podcast and then experience, have experience with bullying or maybe going through bullying at the time, at this moment, I hope to let everyone know that that's not going to last forever and then you're going to only become a stronger person.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I have so much respect for you because you've been open about this experience,
Mm,
I think, ever since I met you when we were still in our 20s. And Um, until I was in my 30s, I wasn't comfortable with the fact that I had that in my past. I was ashamed, basically, and I was
mm.
embarrassed. And I thought that's something I need to hide from people I just met. But now I'm completely open because I realize that it actually might help someone out there and it might actually help
Exactly.
prevent things like that happen.
You, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I obviously felt ashamed of myself being bullied. And at that time, obviously, I only thought about, why is this happening? And I felt, yeah, it was a big shame, But now, I think looking back, that only gave us like strength, and we shouldn't be ashamed of anything. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
we should be proud that we overcame with our hardships.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, I think one of the strengths that I can be proud of is the fact that I think I recognize pain and loneliness in other people. And I think it's thanks, no, not thanks, but like because of that experience,
Yes.
really. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Um,
Yeah, of
and I am so
course.
glad that your study abroad experience and other experiences that you've had have led to shaping who you are today.
Mm,
And shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to ask
mm,
about your family. So,
sure.
would you mind telling me how you met your husband?
Of course, sure. So I met my husband Alex. almost like 15 years ago.
Mm,
And he's originally from London. And when we met, we actually worked in the same tech company. At the time, it was a startup tech company, headquartered in San Francisco, originally from Norway.
mm.
And we met in Jamaica for company kickoff.
Wow.
So at that time, we were just colleagues. But we became closer when we took a trip, in between Hong Kong and Tokyo. He was living in Hong Kong, I was living in Tokyo at the time. And he came to Tokyo for a business trip. I went to Hong Kong for business trips. And then that's how we got to know each other.
Hmm.
And then we became closer. So we did 2 years of long distance between Hong Kong and Tokyo first before he moved to Tokyo for us.
Hmm. Hmm. And would you mind telling me about your daughter?
Sure. So I had my daughter almost 4 years ago during COVID. And she is now a wonderful human being who talks a lot now, right? So I
Mm.
enjoy that a lot more than actually spending time with babies, who don't communicate much. Yeah. Yeah. So we enjoy spending time with her a lot. So we had her, yeah, so almost 4 years ago, but I honestly had a really difficult birth experience. That I had quite severe postpartum after that. I think also
Mm.
COVID didn't really help either
Hmm.
because I was stuck in Japan and I wasn't able to travel. And, before COVID, I was like pretty much traveling every month for work and for personal travels. So I think, yeah, so I went through a lot after the birth. And I've decided to also did a epidural instead of natural birth. You know how
Mm.
in Japan natural birth is quite common, but I
Hmm.
decided to do the Western way, which is the epidural,
Hmm.
and that damaged my back so much that I'm still actually not able to sleep on my back. So it's been almost
Mm.
4 years, and I'm still not able to sleep on my back, and I deal with this pain every day.
Hmm.
Yeah, so definitely it kind of damaged me, like mentally, emotionally, physically. But I think I'm in a much better place now, year by year. So I quite hopeful that I'm gonna be better in the future.
Hmm. Hmm. And as you said, I'm sure it's really helpful that you're now able to communicate with your daughter
Mm.
because it's so much even more rewarding, I'm sure, to be able to have feedback from her and be able to reciprocate that love with each other, etc. That's really
Yeah,
great.
yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to ask you how you've been moving around so much and, where do you consider your hometown?
Yeah, so that is a very difficult question for me because when I think about it, I feel like I have a hometown everywhere. So, like
Mm,
as I mentioned, I do have family in Pacific Northwest, and then I also have family friends in DC area, and then obviously I have parents living in Tokyo. So I feel like I have hometown everywhere I go. And then obviously outside of US and Japan, I have lots of friends from all over the world. But I think I feel, if you ask me what my hometown is, probably like Tokyo and probably the US.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah. So two those places in the US.
mm-hmm. Where in the US? It was it.
So, the
Mhm.
Pacific Northwest or and also Washington DC area.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really great. And I know you're in Tokyo now, but do you think you'll be staying there or would you be moving somewhere else maybe?
Yeah, so no, I'm not going to stay here. So what happened was, my job originally took me back to Asia. So
Mm,
when I was living in DC, I got this job in tech company, and then they took me back to Singapore first, and I stayed in Singapore, and then after that, moved to Tokyo to set up, their Tokyo office, back then. So since then, I've been obviously here building my career and network, but the reason why I'm really here is actually my husband.
mm,
When he moved to Tokyo, he fell in love with Tokyo
mm,
that we decided to stay, even though I had one small opportunity to go back to the US for work,
mm,
but I turned it down. So I think, yeah, so we've been living here quite a long time now that I think we're ready to, you know, move on from Japan and then maybe like a new challenge. So I
mm,
think that's what we are looking at right now. And then probably, we're looking to US. So I think US
mm,
is an option, even though he's from London.
mm, mm. That's so interesting that, between the two of you, you're the Japanese national, but you want to leave Tokyo, and he's the British national, but he loves Tokyo. And it's
Yes, yes, that's right.
it really shows that, your hometown is not necessarily where you physically grew up, but also how you mentally connect with different cities throughout the world. I
Yeah,
think that's fascinating.
yeah, absolutely.
And I think one of the core themes, listening to you and also looking back at our friendship, is your spirit to support women. And you
Mm,
mentioned that that's something that you studied at UO. But also, I understand when we first met in DC about 20 years ago, you were working at a women's shelter, right?
yes.
So, would you mind explaining about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was very lucky enough to get this position. I personally think it was such a rewarding and humbling experience. So I was working for this one of the largest social service agencies in DC that helps women, especially homeless women, women who's been going through go through domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. So I think I was there to help manage in a day center, and I ended up working for them for 3 years. I think when I joined this organization, my former boss, I still remember this day. She told me that this job is not for everyone
Mm-hmm.
because you deal with emergency all the time. It could be unsafe at the time, and it could be there might be a fight or there might be conflict,
Mm-hmm.
between these ladies. So I think yeah, I had such a great experience working for them. Especially, I enjoyed building relationship with these women every day, and it's not easy to build a trust with
Mm-hmm.
especially these like homeless women, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think I learned a lot from these women about how to be resilient, how to make informed decision or like maybe smart decision in life, or how to help these vulnerable women. Yeah, so I think that was one of the profound experiences that I had in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that you're still continuing to this day. I understand that you're a leader of a women's employee resource group at your
Oh
workplace. Is that
yes,
right?
yes,
Would you
that's
mind
right.
telling me about that?
Yeah, so I work for one of the large IT companies in Japan. It's a US companies, and I the head of Japan
Hmm.
for this women's resource group. So I lead this women's group internally in Japan office. And what we do is that we help develop the next generation of young female women to make sure that they can work on their skill set and confidence to become leaders in the future in the companies. And what we do normally is that we organize internal small events or mentoring programs or even like large events like International Women's Day, which happens in March every year. So like for example, we invite external speakers, usually like thought leaders. So like
Hmm.
for example, last year we uh, were lucky enough to invite former Yokohama mayors. So she's a quite famous thought leader in the industry, and she's actually in their 70s. And
Wow.
who, yeah, she's an amazing leader, incredible women leader who has gone through so much, so much hardships in the back in the day in Japan.
Hmm.
So I get to work with these like thought leaders or like executives or maybe like young female employees who are like ambitious, to
Hmm.
become leaders. So I think
Hmm.
those are just simply that inspires me.
Hmm. Um, how has becoming a mother changed your the way you think in terms of
Mm.
supporting other women? Has that it's probably been helpful, but how
Hmm.
so, would you say?
Yeah, I think it helped me more. I think I became more understanding about how hard motherhood can be. I
Hmm.
honestly think that I couldn't have survived without my mother right after I had, my daughter because, I had such a tough, difficult birth that if my mother was not around, I don't think I could have survived because she helped me
Mm,
so much, throughout those like past 2 months.
mm,
I mean, right after, I had a baby.
mm,
So I honestly think mothers are amazing.
mhm,
And I think I respect all the mothers from all over the world that uh, especially at work, whenever like they have to go look after kids because they're sick or they have to pick up kids from daycare or whatsoever, I think I have so much more understanding and, you know, care for them. So
mhm,
definitely that changed my mindset before I had a kid.
mhm, mhm. All right. And speaking of ambitious and accomplished women, I wanted to ask you about your experience with Mrs. Universe, which I think is so incredible. It's such a rare experience. Could you tell me about that?
Of course. So I had a opportunity to become a finalist of Mrs. Universe Japan 2024 last year. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. I so enjoyed that. I never thought of like doing contest before in my life, but so there's like a 45 finalists,
Mm,
all women, aged between 30s to 70s.
wow.
And yeah, what's so amazing is that everyone was ready to show their vulnerabilities. Like, for example, like they are ready to talk about their life struggles and stories, I mean, everything's online, so everyone can read about it. But they're so honest about, how you overcame with their challenges in life and lives, and then also how they're actually facing the current challenges in lives. So there's obviously like single moms and people who have maybe like uncurable disease, but then who run their own businesses.
Mm,
So I think there's simply amazing women, like a group of women that I met, and I was so inspired by them. Because if you were just working in the same company for a long time, like you wouldn't meet these kind of women, right? So I wanted to do something different last year because after I had a baby,
mm,
my daughter, I haven't had a chance to like challenge myself other than like work or yeah, I guess so. So other than work, so I wanted to challenge myself, and this was like a incredible experience that I had, and I was so fortunate enough to win the title. I won the 40th category.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, and then I met so many role models. Like for example, there's a woman who's in the 50s, and she is someone I so admire. She runs her own businesses, and then have incurable disease, and then have two kids, and but still like juggling all these things. But then she doesn't look like 50s. You know,
Mm,
she looks amazing. Like she's so beautiful and inside out.
mhm, mhm,
And then there's a person who's in her 60s, who obviously doesn't look like 60s. And then I really want to find out her secret of these like beauty, inner beauty, and of course, inside out. Yes, I met these women last year that really helped me also understand motherhood as well, because I think I really needed a big, like a community of these like mothers who I can relate to. Because
mhm,
I only had my own mother who can go to for maybe questions, right? Or like my friends who's got kids.
mhm,
But then these women, of course, went through all the parenting already. Or some kids, their kids are already grown ups, and then some obviously women have like small children. Yeah, so I could share my challenges, in terms of parenting. So I think that really helped me a lot.
mhm, mhm.
It's not
Mhm,
typical beauty pageant. So it's about women's empowerment, how we can contribute to society, and how it's more about internal beauty. And then we obviously do like a make speech about how you can contribute, or how you can make a difference in society, things like this. So I think
mhm,
I think it's amazing.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And this kind of relates to the previous question, but it also goes back to how you really are able to make friends among people with
Mm.
such different cultures and backgrounds and circumstances. So I wanted to ask, when you first meet someone, how do you find that common ground? And how do you stay friends with them when you obviously are in different countries or, yeah,
Mhm.
different locations, etc.
Yeah, sure. So I'm naturally a very curious person, and I'm obviously outgoing. So I love, getting to know new people and meeting new people. So when you meet someone new, I always ask questions that interested them. So
Mm-hmm.
like that's how you find the kind of common grounds. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you obviously introduce yourself to each other and then talk about like, oh, where you're from? Oh, I've been there. You just ask, question and question, question. I think people love to talk about themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I ask so many questions and then make them talk.
Mm-hmm.
And if then all of a sudden there's like so much in common, like something that you find, right? When you're having conversation,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a common ground that you can find. Then
Mm-hmm.
after that, if you want to keep in touch with, for example, some people, then I usually either like go visit them to these different countries or just simply message them on WhatsApp
Mm-hmm.
or I mean, social media of course helps, but I'm not really like a big on social media. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think keep in touch is just I think it's simple. I think yeah, it takes effort, but it's very simple action. You just have to kind of message, hey, how are you? I haven't spoken to you for a while. I just want to check in. Or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm going to visit this different country. Could you give me tips? Like, I think it's very simple and like, I think it's good to, I guess, keep in touch with people that I think the meeting people is like a treasure for me,
Mm-hmm. Oh.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, so I guess I like to do that quite often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I really respect and
Mm,
appreciate about you because you're always so good at staying in touch. And obviously, we're based in different countries now, but every time you visit, you always send me a message or, a couple times a year for sure, just to check in, as you said. And what I also appreciate about you is that you always understand the other person's like personality and needs because you're someone who's always surrounded by friends. You have everywhere you go, you're surrounded by crowds, but at the same time, when you reach out to me, you always make the time to see me one on one because you know that
mm,
that's what I'm comfortable with. So
hmm.
I just wanted to say, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, of course.
That's so nice.
It's also hard to meet people when you are older, I'll
Mhm,
say.
mhm,
Yeah. So I think you meet people through friends and then
mhm,
or connections. I think that, I obviously I'm a very spiritual person, like as you
mhm,
know. So I think meeting someone like meeting people is like,
mhm,
maybe like it's got meant to be
mhm,
kind of thing.
mhm. Yeah.
So I want to cherish that.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I also wanted to ask, so if you have any words of advice for people who might be struggling because of difficult life choices, like
Mm-hmm.
what we discussed earlier, where to be based, as you move around, where do you feel most comfortable with? Like what sort of
Mm-hmm.
jobs do you want? Would you have any advice for them?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is advice, but I truly feel I think that's a privilege. Yeah, like I personally think that I'm envious of them if they have a choices
Mm,
to live in different parts of the world, or you have a choice to work for any companies in like different parts of the world. I think that's a privilege. So I think I want them to take advantage of that and then embrace learning different cultures and perspectives and even challenges because that only helps you to become a better person
mhm,
and better human beings. And then that would only give you positive life experiences.
mhm, mhm. Well, thank you so much. I think that covered everything I wanted to ask. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything I
Okay.
missed?
No, Shiori, thank you so much for this. Just giving me such a amazing opportunity for me to speak with you on podcast. And
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, this is my first time actually doing podcast interviews, so it was so exciting. At the same time, it's a bit nervous,
Uh,
nerve-wracking.
uh.
Yeah, but it was fun. Thank you.
Mhm, thank you so much.